It's 4:40 on a Friday afternoon, and you're standing at a counter in a shoe repair shop on Delacorte Street, holding a paper ticket with the number 61 written on it in pencil. The shop smells like leather cement and hot machine oil. There's a radio somewhere in the back playing a game nobody in here is following. On the counter in front of you, in a paper bag with the top folded over twice, is a pair of brown shoes you bought 21 years ago for $88 on a clearance rack. This is the 5th time they've been resoled. The man behind the counter charges $61 now. The first time, it was $38. Behind you, the door opens and a guy in a good jacket comes in with a pair of boots he's decided aren't worth fixing. He says so out loud, to nobody in particular. He leaves them on the counter and walks out. The man behind the counter says people do that all the time now. Your name is on a deed for a house that's paid off. Your name is on 5,610 shares of an index fund you have never sold a single unit of. Last month, without you noticing it happen, the account crossed $1 million. Nobody on Delacorte Street knows that. Not the man wrestling your shoes. Not the guy who just abandoned his boots. Not your brother. Not one person at the company where you've worked for 21 years. Here's the contradiction, and it's the entire reason this story exists. You look like a man who can't afford new shoes. You are, by a wide margin, the wealthiest person who will walk into this shop this year. That didn't happen because you learned to save. Almost everyone knows how to save. It happened because somewhere around 25, you stopped thinking like a person who earns money and started thinking like a person who intends to still have it in 40 years. Those two things, it turns out, give almost opposite instructions. You don't know yet what that will eventually do to the people around you. You don't know yet that the hard part was never building it. It starts 21 years earlier, at a parts counter, with a woman on a loading dock pointing at a roof. You're 25. You work the parts counter at Corrigan Mechanical Supply, a commercial HVAC distributor in a metal building off the state route, selling compressors and contactors and filter racks to men who come in at 6 in the morning covered in insulation dust. Take home is $1,090 every 2 weeks. Rent is $760 for half a duplex with a furnace that short cycles all winter. After the phone and the insurance and the gas, there's usually somewhere between $60 and $200 to get you to the next Friday. $60 is a real number in this duplex. $60 decides whether you go to the dentist about the tooth or wait and see what it does on its own. The building has a facilities manager named Lorraine. She's 59. She's run maintenance here since before there was a second bay, and she eats lunch on the loading dock in any weather that isn't actively falling. She carries the same green thermos every day. In 4 years, you never hear her mention money once. One afternoon in October, you're out there with a sandwich and she points up at the roof, at the 2 big units squatting behind the parapet. That one on the left cost more than my house did, she says. Nobody in this building has thought about it in 9 years. That's what owning something actually looks like. Quiet until it isn't. Then she screws the cap back on the thermos and goes inside. You think about it for the length of a slow minute, and then a delivery backs into the bay and it's gone. 2 weeks later, mostly by accident, you open a brokerage account on your phone in the parking lot during a dead hour. It takes about 9 minutes. You put in $45. $45 is a haircut you'll postpone. It isn't a plan, it's barely a habit. But you do one thing that afternoon that turns out to matter more than the $45 does. When you write it down, you don't put it under saving. You put it under a word you make up for yourself, which is owned, because the app doesn't show you dollars first. It shows you a number of shares. 1.4 of them. You have no idea yet why that column is the only thing that will save you. In February, the alternator goes on your car, $390. You don't have $390. It goes on a card at 24%, and it takes you until June to clear it. And every statement in between carries a line on it that makes you feel about 11 years old. You don't cancel the $45. You come very close twice. By the following October, the account holds $1,140. Nobody knows. There's nothing to tell anybody. And for the next 4 years that stays true, which is the part that almost stops you. 4 years pass and nothing happens. That's not a summary. That's the honest texture of it. You get moved off the counter into purchasing. $47,000, then $51,000. Both times, before the new number ever lands in checking, you push the transfer up to match it. $45 becomes $180, becomes $310 a paycheck. You never feel either raise, because you never let either raise learn where you live. A guy named Brant starts the same year you move up. Same age, roughly the same money, far better with people than you will ever be. He's in outside sales inside a year and good at it immediately. Brant leases a car, then he rents a house with a yard that's too big for two people. Then he finances a ring, then a wedding, then a pool in a yard he doesn't own. You don't judge him for any of it. He isn't reckless. He works Saturdays when the quarter is tight, and he picks up everybody's lunch when it isn't, and he enjoys every single one of those things, which is a completely reasonable thing to do with money you earned. Here's the only real difference, and neither of you will put words to it for another decade. Brant is exceptionally good at using things. You've become quietly obsessed with owning them. Nothing about your life photographs well during this stretch. Nobody congratulates you for a share count. There's no ceremony for a duplex you didn't move out of. The account crosses $29,600 on a Wednesday in March. You find out about it 3 days later. You think the boring part is the hard part. It isn't. The boring part is just the part with no witnesses. You're 32 when the account crosses $100,000 on a Sunday morning, while you're standing at the stove waiting for a pot of water to boil. You look at it. You put the phone face down on the counter. The water boils. You keep waiting for the number to do something to you, and it does almost nothing, and you stand there feeling faintly cheated by that. 9 weeks later, the market falls 22% over about 2 months. $100,000 becomes $79,400. You watch it happen in pieces, on your phone, at a parts counter between customers. Brant asks you about it in the break room, half joking, whether you're getting wrecked out there. You tell him you're fine. Your hands are cold and you're not completely sure whether that's a lie. Here's what saves you, and it isn't courage. You have never once tracked the dollar column. For 7 years, the only number you've written down at the end of the month is the share count, and the share count has never gone down. Not in a bad month, not in a bad year, not in the 9 weeks where a fifth of your money appeared to evaporate. It goes up every single month because it's the only column that responds to what you do instead of what everybody else is feeling that week. So you keep the transfer running. $480 a paycheck now into a fund that is temporarily on sale, which means the same $310 buys more of the thing than it did in March. Nobody explains it to you in a way that feels good while it's happening. It feels like walking into a burning store to buy the shelves. 14 months later, the account isn't back to $100,000. It's at $138,000. You bought shares every 2 weeks straight through the fall, and they are the cheapest shares you will ever own in your life. You didn't know that at the time. Nobody does. The only reason you held is that you'd spent 7 years training yourself to look at a column that couldn't frighten you. That winter, the tooth you've been ignoring since you were 25 finally makes the decision for you. $740, a crown, nothing meaningful from insurance. You pay it out of a cash account you built for exactly this, and you're back at work the same afternoon. 7 years ago, a $390 alternator ate 4 months of your life. You notice that. You notice it the way you'd notice a room getting warmer. You think about Lorraine on the loading dock, pointing at a roof, quiet until it isn't. You get about halfway to understanding what she meant, and then a truck backs into the bay and you lose it again. It takes another 14 years and a phone call from your brother to get the rest of it. You're 34 when you buy a house. The mortgage broker tells you what you're approved for. $355,000. He says it the way people say numbers they expect you to be pleased about. You buy at $186,000. A brick ranch on Ledbetter with an original 1978 kitchen and a driveway that needs sealing. He asks you twice if you're sure. Not rudely, he genuinely cannot work out why a man would voluntarily use half of what he was handed. You don't explain it. The explanation is that the other $169,000 was never a house. It was a payment, and a payment is just how you rent a life from a bank. You put 20% down in cash and you never carry mortgage insurance for a single month. 3 years later, at 37, the sewer line under the front yard collapses. $4,300, a backhoe, 2 days of an open trench across your lawn. You transfer it and you go to work. You don't open a calculator. You don't mention it to anyone. Somewhere in the middle of the second day, you realize the feeling never came, and the absence of it is more disorienting than the feeling would have been. That December, out of nothing but curiosity, you run an arithmetic you've never bothered with before. Your contributions that year, $14,880. The growth in the account that year, from appreciation and dividends alone, with nothing you did attached to any of it, $52,900. Your take-home pay that year, after taxes, was $51,600. The money made more than you did. It didn't clock in. It didn't stand at a counter at 6 in the morning. It didn't drive out in the rain to look at a unit somebody had already broken twice. It just sat there, being owned. Not every year looks like that. Markets don't move in straight lines, and this particular stretch has been kinder than most of them are. You know that. You've read enough to know it. But this is the crossover, and it doesn't arrive with anything attached. It arrives as a figure on a Thursday night, in a house with a hole in the front yard, next to an invoice from a man with a backhoe. Around this time, you start doing business with a contractor named DeWitt, who runs 16 trucks and is by every visible measure the most successful person you deal with. New equipment, a shop with his name on the side, a lake place he mentions the way people mention things they'd like you to ask about. At lunch one afternoon, he tells you, laughing, that a slow February almost put him under. Not near it, under it, 16 trucks, a shop, a lake place, and a line of credit doing every bit of the load bearing. You don't feel superior. That isn't the feeling. It's closer to vertigo. Two men at the same table, and only one of them owns anything. You've stopped being the only engine. It'll be 3 more years before you understand that the second engine changes the people around you too. At 40, they offer you regional purchasing manager, $19,000 more a year. It also comes with a company car, a company phone, a fuel card, and an expense account with your name printed on it. Everyone at Corrigan treats that package as the actual prize. The salary is the salary. The car is the status. You sit with it for 4 days, which surprises your director considerably more than the answer eventually does. You turn it down, not because $19,000 doesn't matter. It matters, and it always will. And you understand better than almost anybody in that building exactly what $19,000 a year compounds into across 20 years. You turn it down because of the car, take the role, and every visible thing in your life belongs to Corrigan Mechanical Supply. The car in your driveway, the phone in your pocket, the fuel you burn getting to a house you paid for yourself. You'd look, from any parking lot in the state, considerably more successful, and you'd own less than you do right now. 18 years of this, and you've built one reflex that overrides all the others. You don't trade an owned thing for a used one, not for $19,000, not for a better parking spot. Your director tells you most people would take it without thinking. He's right. Most people would. You did the math instead. And the math said the portfolio, sitting at $438,000 that spring, produces in an average year more than the raise does, and asks nothing of you for it, and can't be taken back by a company having a bad quarter. Freedom, when it finally shows up, doesn't look like anything. There's no scene. It's a Tuesday where you say no to something reasonable for a reason that would have sounded insane to you at 25. Where it actually shows up is smaller. And off to the side, your brother Colby, 4 years younger, runs a 2-truck landscaping outfit and loses a transmission and a season's deposit inside the same month. $9,400 to keep his crew and his contracts intact. You send it that afternoon, you don't make it a loan, you don't build a repayment schedule. You don't bring it up again, then or ever. That's the whole thing. That's what 21 years of this actually buys. You don't know yet that it's also the beginning of the part nobody warned you about. Here's the part nobody warned you about. You become useful. It happens so gradually, there's no moment to point at. The $9,400 to Colby, then a cousin's security deposit, then a furnace at your mother's house you handle before anybody asks. Because at this point, you can hear a furnace failing over the phone. None of it is a burden. That's exactly what makes it invisible. Every one of those was money you were glad to spend and never missed. And you'd do all of it again tomorrow without a second of hesitation. What you don't notice, for almost 6 years, is the shape it is quietly putting on everything else. Your phone rings less. When it rings, something is wrong. You're 46 the afternoon you finally see it. Colby calls on a Wednesday and tells you, flat, almost in passing, that he landed a municipal contract. 3 years of scheduled work, the thing he's been building toward since he was 22. He's on the phone 90 seconds. He doesn't sound proud. He sounds like a man reporting inventory. You hang up and you sit in the truck in your own driveway for a while and you work out what happened, which is that your brother has stopped telling you good news. Good news, coming from him to you, would sound like bragging to the guy with the money. Bad news is the only thing that reliably gets a response. The channel narrowed to one direction, and neither of you did it on purpose. Renata finds you out there. She's been a hospice nurse for 11 years, which makes her very difficult to lie to about what a thing actually is. She asks what's wrong, and you don't have a clean answer. It comes out slower and worse than you want it to. Something about how you thought the money would let you be more of a brother, and instead it turned you into a department. She's quiet for a second. Then she says the sentence you'll think about for the next 2 years. You're not the person they call anymore. You're the thing they call when something breaks. And that's when Lorraine comes back to you, 21 years late, standing on a loading dock pointing up at a roof. The most expensive thing in the building. Essential to everything happening underneath it. Nobody has thought about it in 9 years. Quiet until it isn't. She was describing an asset. You just never expected to become one. You don't fix it in a conversation. It isn't the kind of thing that has a conversation. What you do is smaller and slower and probably insufficient. You start calling first. You start asking about the municipal contract by name every few weeks, the way you'd ask about a person instead of a balance. You start showing up to things that don't have a problem attached to them. Some of it works, some of it doesn't. Colby still leads with what's broken. It's 4:40 on a Friday afternoon, and you're standing at the counter on Delacorte Street with ticket number 61 in your hand. The shop still smells like leather cement and hot machine oil. The radio's still going in the back. The shoes come across the counter in a paper bag with the top folded over twice, resoled for the 5th time in 21 years for $61, which is $23 more than the first time, and several $100 less than 21 years of replacing them would have run you. The abandoned boots are still sitting at the end of the counter. They've been there a week. You think about Brant, who is 46 too, who has had a genuinely wonderful 21 years, who has driven better cars than you and thrown better parties and taken better trips, and who has at the end of all of it a lease, a rent payment, a pool loan, and a Saturday shift when the quarter is tight. He isn't a cautionary tale. He's a man who chose to use things beautifully. Some days you're not entirely sure he chose wrong. The account, if you opened it, would say a little over $1 million. That's not the interesting number. The interesting number is 5,610, which is how many shares you own, and which has never once gone down in 21 years, in any market, in any mood, regardless of what anybody happened to be panicking about that particular week. Nobody on this street knows either number. You started thinking like old money at 25, in a parking lot, with $45 and a column nobody told you to watch. Everything changed. Almost none of it changed anywhere a person could see. You take the bag, you walk out, you wear the shoes home. If this story made you think differently about the difference between using things and owning them, hit like and subscribe for more stories like this one. And I'm curious, what's the one thing in your life you'd rather own once than rent forever? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.